All right. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Today we are here to talk about the creator economy. So by a show of hands here, who has heard of the creator economy to get us started? I'll take it. We got a modest 25 to 35% there. Gives us some good subject to dive into. So I want to start by just giving a quick round of intros to our wonderful panelists here. For those that I don't know, my name's Cooper. I'm excited to be joined by Morgan Beller, the general partner of NFX, and Favre, VP of Special Projects at OpenSea, and Li Jin, co-founder and general partner at Variant. So with that in mind, we're going to start. We're going to go down the line here. Morgan, why don't you give us a quick introduction on yourself and tell us about why you're here today?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Cooper, and the Permissionless team. So I'm Morgan Beller. I am originally from Long Island, New York, and moved out to California about 9 years ago to work at Andreessen Horowitz. And I was there when they kind of had their come to Jesus crypto moment, but I was too dumb then to dedicate my life to it. But the first crypto deal I worked on was actually Media Chain with Jesse, which was all about the creator economy. Fast forward, ended up at Medium, which was about the creator economy, but in a Web 2.0 sense, so we can maybe talk about that. And then realized life's about network effects, and that despite the fact that Medium was founded kind of to go against Facebook, I ended up at Facebook, where I helped start the cryptocurrency efforts there, and most recently joined NFX. I'm here because I love all the creator, I guess, stream throughout the past 9 years.
I love it. You've seen it all.
I've not seen it all.
And tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work you've been doing at OpenSea. I think it's a fascinating space to dive into.
Yeah, definitely. So first I'd say just super happy to be here. And I think I'll do a quick shout out and say there's an NFT gallery that we're sponsoring that's just around the corner. Definitely recommend checking it out. A lot of awesome creators there. But I'd say, yeah, thrilled to be here today. I've been in this space for a while, and I like to think about what matters to me with creators really is starting from the tech side. So what brought me to this space was really this promise of what blockchain can do about giving ownership and control back to individuals and as well as creators. And I think it's been really exciting to see what NFTs have done more broadly in the ecosystem to really drive that sense of control and ownership for everyone in this space, but I think specifically for creators. So excited to dive into that a little bit and talk about some of the benefits and also some of the things that we still need to continue to work on and make better.
I love it, and thank you so much for being here. Lee, I'll pass it over to you next. As someone that's been very involved with the term the creator economy, I think you have a great lens on this. Love for you to give a quick intro and then tell us about what you're working on.
Hey everyone, it's really great to be here. As mentioned, I'm currently a general partner and co-founder of Variant Fund. We're a generalist seed stage crypto venture firm. I've been personally investing in consumer software for about 6 years, beginning initially at Andreessen Horowitz, where I was covering consumer marketplaces, social platforms, the creator economy, and many other consumer categories. And after that, I then started my own fund called Atelier Ventures to invest in the future of online work, which included the creator economy. And that is how I got interested in crypto and Web3 in the first place. It was really from the perspective of how do we enfranchise the participants of all of these multi-sided networks who previously didn't have ownership in this very sort of unbalanced way, despite contributing the bulk of the value to these networks. So that's what drew me into Web3 in the first place, and I remain very interested in the creator economy to this day. I've invested in platforms like Substack and Patreon on the Web2 side, as well as platforms like Mirror and Foundation and many others on the Web3 side. And then on the side, I'm also a part-time creator myself with a newsletter, podcast, courses that I've taught, many other things. So I think have lots of different vantage points on the creator economy.
I love that. And you have such a nice framing of the creator economy. I'd love for you to take us back to really the 3 phases that you talk about in the development of the creator economy and maybe how that leads to Web3 creator economy and where we are today.
Absolutely. So oftentimes when we hear about the creator economy, it's presented as something that is new, that is emerging for the first time ever. Even the name of this panel is the creator economy emerges. And that's kind of a misnomer because the creator economy, I like to say, has been around really since the dawn of the internet. Ever since we had social media platforms and UGC platforms, that enabled everyone using those platforms to become a creator, to create on the internet. So really since the late 1990s, early 2000s, when we had the beginning of social networks, that is what I consider to be the dawn of the creator economy. So that is what I call the creator economy 1.0. And since then, we've gone through multiple phases of the creator economy, where I consider the next progression of the creator economy to be the rise of the influencer in the early 2010s. And so this was a period in which some users of those UGC platforms gained a lot of influence, amassed outsized audiences, and became influencers. They were able to monetize by usually being a conduit for other brands and companies to advertise their wares. They were monetizing through things like YouTube AdSense or by selling sponsorship posts on their Instagrams. So that was the creator economy 2.0. The phase that we're in right now is what I call creator economy 3.0, which is creators as businesses in their own right. So instead of being a channel to sell other brands' products or shill, other wares, they themselves are the product. They are the face of their own brand. And so they are pursuing more direct monetization channels like tipping or selling their own subscription newsletter or having their own branded merchandise like Mr. Beast's burger. But in any case, the phase that we're in right now is really creators becoming businesses in their own right, gaining a lot of power and influence, pursuing a wide range of direct monetization channels, and that leads us to then the Web3 monetization methods, including social tokens and NFTs, that I think really represent an extension of this period of time in which creators are emerging as very powerful businesses.
I love that, and I really want to hyper-focus on that word ownership, because I think it's so important. Specifically for Web3 creator economy, as you mentioned, users have been generating content for so long, but for the first time, we're seeing these creators capture ownership in the networks that they create value for. Anne, I want to toss this over to you because you've had such an interesting perspective working with creators at OpenSea, and specifically in the midst of this whole NFT bull run. Would love for you to talk a little about sort of your relationship with the creators on your platform and how you guys interact with them, some of the challenges they face, and some of the benefits they've had just by being so present in the Web3 environment.
Yeah, totally. I'd start by saying I think one of the interesting things that Lee's highlighting here is also just this removal of friction across time. And so we see obviously pre-creator economy 1.0, there's obviously thousands of years of art. And a lot of it then is how are you taking friction out of the process for actually delivering that art, delivering other types of creation to your audiences, to other folks who want to collect, and ultimately in the end, like creating other owners of that work as well. And so I think what's really exciting about Web3 from a just channel distribution perspective is this idea that you're really removing all of that friction. It just makes it much easier for creators to engage with their users and sell things that they're really passionate about. It's obviously much more than that, though. And so the other thing I'd say, and honestly what really so excites me about Web3 every day, is this ability to turn customers or users into your community and into people that are invested in the project that you're a part of as well. And so what's been so cool about that, I think NFTs are an example of this, social tokens definitely, is that you start to see people really have stake in the game themselves, getting engaged themselves, whether it's in a Discord channel or being involved in real life events with a creator. But it's really different than sort of the transactional relationship that you might have seen before in Web 2, where you see something, you might like the person, you follow them, but it really doesn't matter to you how that person does. Like, this is about a much more tethered back and forth relationship. And so thinking about OpenSea's role in that, we really just see ourselves as a conduit for those relationships and for creators to promote and show and highlight the work that they're doing and to connect with their community, but also bring in new community members as well. And so, yeah, I think it's been very cool to see that. I think some of the things for us that are exciting, but also that we want to continue to invest in, right, are like us making sure we're creating safe spaces for creators, both to engage with their community, but also to engage with each other. One thing we found actually is we've had a couple experiments where we've actually just like, this is so simple, but like tested out smaller groups where we're engaging creators who have similar interests or similar chain interests with each other and allowing them to innovate and connect with each other in a safe space where there may not be collectors. So creating those types of environments where they can be supported is really important. And then certainly finding more and more ways for creators of all sizes, whether they're the biggest ones, Yuga Labs, et cetera, or indie creators that are just getting started, giving them a platform both on our site, but also through all of our social channels as well to really make sure that folks can find the community that's most excited about them as well.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, just the diversity of creators that are on the platform. You know, I have so many different asset classes, so many different categories. You have everything from a Yuga Labs to someone just minting NFTs out of their bedroom. And so there's no one playbook for everyone. You know, it's a very iterative model, and I think that's a really amazing position just to be in, because we are so early in Web3 creator economy that all of that can live under one roof, whereas we're so used to these different platforms taking on different verticals. You have, you know, Instagram, for example, versus a Spotify versus a YouTube. And right now, one of the benefits of OpenSea being so early is that it kind of houses all of that content in one place. And so for you as someone working with creators, I'm sure that's probably a really interesting position to be in, and I'm sure that there's no shortage of difficult conversations being had every day.
Yeah, I think definitely a responsibility for us also to use the surfaces we have to make sure we're giving voice to a big diversity of creators as well, whether that's our homepage or on Discord. We've also recently, there was just a proposal that went through on Friends with Benefit to actually give some of the control of our homepage actually to Friends with Benefit and actually allow others to help us identify and call out strong creators as well that you know, we can work together to share with a broader community as well.
I love that. And I think the word curation really comes out to me there, because I think we're going to start to see more of an evolution where creator economy, NFTs, social tokens, all these things are really being dictated by the communities that drive their value. And so for someone as big as OpenSea to say, hey, this homepage is monumental in the space of Web3, let's have a really tight-knit community help influence what's on that page, I think that's a really amazing step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Morgan, I want to pass this over to you, because you've had a really big opportunity to work with some major creators yourself in some of your projects. You're actively investing in the space in the creator economy. Talk to me a little bit about some of those early conversations you have with big creators coming into the space and their relationship with starting to do things like NFTs.
Sure. So I think what Cooper's alluding to is I worked on this project called Stoner Cats. So Stoner Cats, yeah, you want me to talk about Stoner Cats? Okay. Stoner Cats came to be because Mila Kunis and her production partner, Lisa Sterbikoff, they had a show called Stoner Cats, and they were having trouble having it financed by traditional studios because A, it was drug content, so either studios wouldn't purchase it for that reason, and or B, they wanted creative control. And the show is about a woman who has Alzheimer's. She gets prescribed medicinal marijuana. She falls asleep. Her cats get the marijuana. They become sentient. And the woman who wrote the show, her mom has Alzheimer's. It was a very personal story for her, and therefore they did not want to give up creative control to a studio. So they asked me, they're like, hey, we don't really know what NFTs are about, but we keep hearing you talk about them, and can we use them to finance this show? And I was like, maybe, but we really need to think about it, because you are celebrities. Like, this will look like a cash grab unless it's actually solving a problem that cannot be solved in any other way. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that, including Cooper. Thank you. You were a helpful advisor early on. The highlight of the whole project, by the way, was Cooper calling Mila a boomer, which was a real thing that happened. And email is for boomers, I think, is what he said. And kind of true.
Stand by it.
Stands by it. So we did come to the conclusion that this would be a unique way to fund the show, and that we could directly connect the creators of the show with the consumers who wanted to see the show. And there were many learning lessons from that. We did this about 13 months ago, and the idea was that there would be 10,420 of these cats, and that they would be an access token for the show. We actually initially, so one of the learning lessons is I thought crypto lawyers and the crypto legal landscape was a pain in the ass, if I'm allowed to say that. It turns out like entertainment times crypto law is like exponentially worse. So there were, I don't want to say there were things we ran into, such as we wanted everyone to be able to watch the show because you want as many fans for Stoner Cats as possible. But it was actually for legal reasons that you can only watch the show if you bought one of the NFTs. So that was one example. Another thing that came up is we realized something we were just talking about backstage is despite the fact that we believe and others believe that maybe NFTs are more of a mainstream use case, and that is a product that more normal people have a mental model for versus like, let's say, yield farming. And so despite the fact that that may be true, the same Rube Goldberg is required to get to that light at the end of the tunnel, and that you need to like buy crypto, and you need to go through exchanges, and you need to set up a wallet. So we felt very, very responsible to educate the potential user base of Stoner Cats on like, this is what MetaMask is. And we did like videos and various forms of content to educate people. And even still, we screwed up some things. So that was a learning lesson, just like, yeah, same Rube Goldberg machine is required, and just the gap in education is still huge. I can talk about Stoner Cats for a while, so maybe I'll pause.
Sure. I mean, the two things I want to pull out from that, moving forward, I think celebrities are going to play a major role in the Web3 creator economy. I think so far people have really been going on a ledge to get out there and try these things like Stoner Cats. But I think one thing that I'm personally really focused on, I know that a lot of people on stage are, is just making sure creators feel welcomed when they're entering Web3. You know, if I am someone that has a major audience behind me and I want to do NFTs, how do we better recommend playbooks and standards that they don't feel like they're going to get ridiculed or isolated by their fan base? And I think it's such a delicate balance that that project really fascinates me. And another thing I'll highlight there is just sort of that on-ramp and off-ramp and that sort of visibility problem where if you want to release something that's Web3 based, you have this sort of barrier to entry where you can't just upload it to YouTube or just put it on Instagram. You kind of have to jump through these hoops to even access the content in the first place. So to that, it signals that we have a far way to go, but it's at least exciting that we're starting to ask those questions because I think it'll allow us to get further along.
I have 2 more points to make about Stoner Cats that might lead to a broader conversation. So none of the talent for the show got paid until the NFTs were sold, which was a huge leap of faith that everyone from the sound engineer to the animators had to take. So that was, we were grateful that they said yes, because otherwise we would not, like they literally had no way to pay these people. And the other was there are still Web 2, Web 1, or even prior generation types creators. Like for Stoner Cats, he was an animator who drew everything by hand. And you still want those types of creators to make their way into Web3, so like toolkits for those folks as well is hard. And then third last point was also realizing that you can't just have art. Like the community part's a huge part, which I think is what Cooper told us. He's like, you can't just sell these cats. You need to, have a Discord, and you need to make consumers feel like they're engaged in the process, and that's definitely something that we're still tweaking, because on one hand, you have consumers who really feel like they want to be not only owners, but contributors to the whole creative process, and on the other hand, you have people who are professionals at doing their job. So, for example, like we said that if we sold 100% of the cats, we would create a DAO where the community could vote on aspects of future episodes, and that is a spectrum, and we're not really sure where to land, because again, on one hand, you want them to feel like they have control, so do you let them choose like what brand the cereal box is in the background of one of the shots? But on the other hand, like you have people who are professional writers, animators, et cetera, and you don't really want them to not be able to do their job. So finding the right balance of having the consumers contribute to the creative process, I think, is also tough.
Yeah, I actually see this being a constant friction with new creators in the space. They'll sell some NFTs, they'll hear about a DAO or some sort of community-based activation. It's one thing to put ETH into a treasury, it's another thing to give someone who comes and likes your post creative control over your future vision.
Right.
And so, Anne, if I had to turn this over to you, what do some of those conversations look like with these bigger projects that have done extremely well for themselves as they start to think about ways to bring their community on board or ways to get deeper involved? Is this something that you guys at OpenSea are helping to talk to creators about, or what is the role that you play in some of these projects as they get bigger and look to sort of scale up their communities?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to touch on what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is just to say, what the story you walked through just reminds me of how early we still are, because I think look, I come from a blockchain tech company, so having a wallet with a GUI is like a massive step ahead, right? It feels so easy to me. But for most people, and for us really to get folks involved in this and feel like they have ownership is both like this on-chain idea, but it's also about empowering them effectively, right? And that means educating folks on what the right playbook might be, giving them all the tools they need to do that, whether it's running their own business, which in many instances this is, building out a community, and giving them the support along the way to, frankly, do what they do best, which is be innovative and creative and give them the tools to sort of avoid some of this operational friction. So I still think there's a long way to go, and I think the story you're noting definitely highlights that. For bigger creators, honestly, I think it's some of the same. I mean, I think for everyone in this space, right, like we've seen a huge amount of demand and interest in this space, frankly, much more quickly than I think anyone expected. And so with that also comes some really amazing stories of creators who've just totally taken off in the space. And with that, I think some of the same questions. what does a playbook look like? Also, it changes. Things are moving so quickly that making sure you're being both innovative but also responsible and responsive to your community is a balance right now. And so I think those are some of the things that I think we hear as well. Certainly as this scales and grows and becomes more mainstream, trust will become even more important, both for collectors as well as creators. And so that's something we also hear as well, is how do we make sure we're representing the view and sort of rights of these rights holders in many ways, and at the same time also empowering them to make their own decisions, decide what is a creative inspiration, and so finding that balance is I think, an interesting thing that we'll see a lot of innovation on as well.
I love that. And if we were to put it into perspective, let's assume that a creator has trust and they have a community. Lee, you brought up a really amazing report backstage about A16Z, State of Web3. There were some amazing statistics on the creator economy that helped us really put into perspective what's happening today. I would love if you could just briefly talk about some of the learnings you pulled out of it and then some of the takeaways that we should know in the audience.
Yeah, there's been several really interesting reports just kind of citing how, like, where are we in the evolution of the Web3 creator economy today, especially as compared to the Web2 creator economy. Like, we talk a lot about NFTs and creator DAOs, but how large is this right now? And the facts and figures behind it basically say that it's super early in terms of overall, like, absolute numbers of creators participating in Web3, but the revenue impact that they're having is very outsized. So to illustrate this, this morning's report on the state of Web3 from A16Z showed that there were about 20,000 creators who earned from some mechanism on Ethereum last year. That could be NFTs, that could be social tokens, whatever it might be, but 20,000 creators experienced any kind of earnings using Ethereum in 2021. That is minuscule in comparison to the overall creator economy. Most recent estimates that I've seen about the overall size of the creator economy say that there's about 200 million creators worldwide who are monetizing their audience in some way. So 20,000 is a tiny, tiny fraction of that. You know, as an investor, if we saw an application that had 20,000 users in Web2, that would be like a pre-seed investment. So the overall number of creators participating is still very small. But the revenue that they're earning is substantial, where the same report showed that last year, those 20,000 creators earned something like $3.9 billion using Ethereum in 2021. $3.9 billion is nothing to sneeze at, and it's actually in the same order of magnitude as a lot of traditional Web2 earnings mechanisms that creators have. So for comparison, YouTube paid out about $15 billion in total to creators last year. YouTube has obviously been around for, you know, about 15 years, much longer than Ethereum has been around, and yet the Web3 creator earnings are very quickly catching up to a very traditional, tried and true social platforms. And so what that tells me is there's just so much latent desire out there on the part of consumers to support their favorite creators. And what crypto uniquely enables is the monetization of superfans, to be able to capitalize on the true desire and willingness of a fan to pay for their favorite creator at a scale that is honestly unprecedented. So whereas the YouTube CPM would be, you know, $3 to $5 for 1,000 views, from selling one NFT to a superfan for, let's say, even 1 ETH represents probably millions of views on that same video. So crypto is enabling creators to monetize at a huge scale versus traditional mechanisms. And I think going back to something that we were speaking about before with regards to these tokens being a mechanism to create community and to create a base of folks who feel more than just a sense of support for the creator, but they feel that they have some skin in the game in the creator's success. I think where this eventually leads us to is an actual dissolution of the creator economy into the next phase, so creator economy 4.0, to continue the evolution that I was saying before, where creator economy 4.0 is actually the community economy, wherein the boundaries between a creator and their fans dissolves and becomes less binary, less clear, and their fans become active participants in the creative process. They become enfranchised and influential in the creative process, and they actually have a financial exposure to the success of the creations of that entire community. That's hugely different from where we are today, where the creator economy exists in pretty much a top-down way, especially on these Web 2 social platforms where a creator creates and audience consumes. What we're starting to see in the Web 3 creator economy is that playing field becomes a lot more level, where there's less of a clear distinction between who's a creator versus who's their audience, and everyone is becoming a co-creator in their own right with financial exposure to the success of the creative output of that community.
I love that. And I want to build on it. One of our close friends, Jesse Walden, has this amazing concept called Patronage Plus. If you could give a quick overview on what that is, and more specifically how it relates to the people that are actually collecting these NFTs from creators, I think that'd be a really interesting perspective.
Yeah. So Patronage Plus is this concept that was coined by my partner at Variant, Jesse Walden. Patronage Plus is basically the concept that in Web3, the reason that you would support a creator through buying an NFT or buying a social token is not only patronage, it's not only the desire to support them out of altruism because you like them. The plus stands for the potential for profit. So patronage with the potential for profit is the underlying motivator for an audience member, a consumer in the Web3 creator economy. Whereas in Web 2, there was no way for you to profit off of supporting a creator. If we think of watching a YouTube video or donating to someone's Patreon or even subscribing to someone's newsletter, you did that really out of the benefit to yourself that was in terms of like knowledge or the content that you got exposed to, but there was no potential for profit from that engagement. And so in Web3, for the first time ever, it introduces this new pool of people into the creator's orbit, which are people who have a desire for profit, who aren't just there out of the purity of a love for that creator necessarily, which is really interesting. So you have speculators for the first time ever in the creator economy. And I think what the impact of that has on the creator economy is that it actually flips the order of a creator life cycle. So in the Web 2 creator economy, the life cycle had been create content for free for years, slog through that process of uploading videos or putting out content out there into the world, hoping to build an audience. And then years later, once you have amassed an audience, turn on monetization through tipping or AdSense or whatever it might be. But in the traditional creator economy, basically you had to create content and build an audience for free for a long time before you could ever monetize. And because Web3 introduces the speculative element through tokens, through Patronage Plus, it's actually flipping the order of that playbook to where people could mint a token initially, sell it to a base of speculators potentially or fans, use that token to bootstrap both funding and an audience, and then use that funding to create content. And hopefully with that content, then attract additional audience members and achieve content market fit. But it's really interesting that that life cycle is flipping to where monetization comes first. Monetization actually bootstraps distribution and then funds the content creation. And I think we're just starting to see this playbook being put into effect with examples like Mad Realities, the Web3 dating show, or even profile picture projects that have these really ambitious metaverse or gaming roadmaps are an example of bootstrapping content creation by using this upfront token.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the interesting thing on my perspective has been being friends with people that have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram or something like this. It's very rare that these creators are capturing any of the upside of those platforms. And for their careers, as you mentioned, they're basically uploading for years at a time in advance, and then they start to get brand deals in, and their livelihood is dependent upon an outside company coming to them with an offer to post content on this platform, which is very different from me being able to collect their first post on the platform, and as they amass a following of 1 million+ people, being able to share in that upside and that collective growth. And so I think that begs the question here. Morgan, I want to tell this to you as someone that used to work at Medium. What is the role of some of these Web 2 platforms in this emerging Web 3 creator economy? We've seen Instagram announce they want to start working with NFTs. Spotify's starting to do some tests there. Do you think that it's viable for them to help slot into the mix here, or what does that relationship look like?
we'll see. I overcorrected and went from Facebook to a seed fund, so I guess I'm kind of voting with my feet there. But to the creator economy evolution that Lee so beautifully mapped out, just to rewind to that for a second, like lowering the barrier to entry isn't a Web3 thing, where like if you wanted to be a creator before, you had to get signed by a talent agency or cast on a show, and now, or even prior to Web3, you can have an Instagram post that goes viral or a YouTube post that goes viral. So lowering the barrier to entry to get to scale and have your voice heard, like that was really a Web2 innovation. I think the Web3 big unlock, and we haven't used this word yet, I'm like waiting, is like incentives. Like it finally aligns incentives with all parties, the platform, the creator, and the consumer. And that, for me, is the bigger unlock than the lowering the barrier to entry part, because again, I think that was done by Web2, arguably better than Web3 today, because NFX stands for network effects. I mentioned I joined Facebook because I believe in network effects. And if you want to have your voice heard by the most number of unique people, the Web2 platforms still have bigger scale. OpenSea is obviously the leader in the Web3 platforms, but I think to Lee's other point, it's a quality over quantity conversation in Web3 right now, where you might reach a smaller number of users, but the ARPU per each of those users is exponentially higher. All of these metrics are really conflated because it's also the ARPU's higher because we're playing with like monopoly money in a way. So it's like, we'll see where it all nets out. But for the Web2 platforms and the role that they have, I think, I don't know if this is going to make me any friends, but I think there's a lot of experiments to be done. I think there's a lot of like low-hanging fruit and kind of table stakes. Like you need to enable NFTs to be able to be used as profile pictures. You need to allow people to pay in crypto. You need to like have a crypto wallet on your platform. Like that's kind of like, okay, fine. And every Web2 platform can, should, and will have those pieces. But for me, it's like you don't have the Web3 part unless you have that incentive mechanism which aligns the platform, the creators, and the consumers. And I haven't seen any Web2 products do that today. It's a bit hard to put that sugar in the cake once it's baked, because if you're a public company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your investors, and that part obviously screws with that a little bit. But unless someone does that, I don't think they'll get it. But I'm curious, I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, I think we're in a very read-only state of Web2 platforms integrating NFTs. You know, platforms like Twitter, you can connect your PFP, but you're not minting directly through the site, and you're definitely not capturing shared upside of any collective growth of Twitter yet. And so there's, you know, sort of these inclinations that things are moving in that direction. I think one of the things that I'm excited about is companies like OpenSea that have been building in this space for so long, the fundamentals are just so much stronger with some of these platforms. There's a fantastic book called The Innovator's Dilemma that talks about how these legacy companies oftentimes are unable to adapt to new technology because they move very slow. And by the time that the boat has moved, you know, they've kind of missed that wave in the first place. And so to turn that into a question, I'm really curious to see how you see something like OpenSea fitting in the mix with a platform like Instagram integrating NFTs, Spotify integrating NFTs. What's kind of the role that OpenSea plays in that conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, an awesome Clayton Christensen reference. Yeah, good, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, look, I'm much more bullish on this Web2 integration. To me, I think it's, at a minimum, good signal that there's something that's going right here in Web3 and with the creator economy that they see. So at a very, very minimum, I think, like, to your point, these are companies that have to make trade-offs. And the fact that they're choosing to invest in this area is a really positive thing. The second thing I'd say is I think that, you know, creators have done very well on those platforms. A lot of them have good relationships with these platforms. We can argue about the goods and bads, but there's a lot of positive that's come out of it. And so seeing those as channels really to introduce a lot of new creators who maybe have been a little nervous about going full hog Web3, to me is a really wonderful opportunity to introduce the value prop and the real value of what social tokens and NFTs can deliver to just a much broader group. So if we think about expanding out this 20,000 person creator group, like this is one really strong way to do it. I think it'll take time, and I think, you know, excited to see what kind of really sustained investment will be made by these platforms, but it is exciting to see, I think, even in Instagram's early days of some of their announcement, you know, at a minimum, it's just given creators an opportunity to highlight something and link to their NFT, right? That in itself is really nice. The same is true for Twitter. Like, so many people posting their PFPs early on, and I remember, like, when I actually feel like I got into NFTs in part by following people on Twitter and being like, what is that? And originally, right, you'd be like, what is that? Like, now I have to search, like, ape in hoodie, like, what is this thing? And so, like, those little integrations actually, I think, go a long way in actually educating folks and, like, driving them to the art that they like, the newsletters they like, all of the type of creation. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic about it. I think there's questions we can talk about around decentralization and all of that, but too early to tell, right? So excited about where it's going.
Yeah, and one of the things I call out there is that there's such a prevalent culture within Web3 that, as you mentioned, when you see someone with one of these profile pictures, it begs the question of what is that,
Yeah.
And now I've gotten to a point where people are very aware of certain things that they see online, but I love the idea of creating, arena games for status, where we have, our physical house with all of our properties and attractions and our cars or whatnot, but we don't quite have that for our online presence quite yet. I think one of the valuable roles that these social platforms can play is if I have a Bored Ape or if I have Metaverse Land, connecting that to my Instagram profile and being able to show that off in a way that I see fit, it's a very exciting opportunity. Lee, I want to turn this over to you as someone who can help give some color to what creator economy in Web3 looks like today. Maybe give you a chance to highlight some of the portfolio companies that you work with, and then also more specifically, this fantastic report you wrote on the update of the ownership economy recently, one of my favorite pieces of the year. Would love for you to talk through some of those findings and just help people leave this panel with a little bit of an understanding of what the creator economy looks like within Web3 today.
Yeah, that was a really long question. So I'll get into this question through the same angle from the question about Web 2 platforms and what do we think about Instagram and Spotify and all of these companies entering NFTs and Web 3. I really welcome it, firstly. So I totally agree with Anne that I think it's going to be a huge education driver for mass adoption, teaching people what an NFT is, how to set up a wallet, et cetera, about these different concepts. But I think ultimately it's going to be a gateway into a much broader world of digital ownership that extends far beyond those Web 2 platforms. So these Web 2 platforms are currently adding Web 3 features as an additional feature onto their platforms, whether that's the profile picture feature or showcasing your NFTs on Instagram or whatever have you. But these are small point features in a much bigger platform that they already have that's already fully baked. And I think ultimately users will use these experiences and learn about being able to actually digitally own something, what it means to own a piece of a digital asset, and realize that there's a much broader world out there of all forms of digital ownership that extend beyond the individual passive form of owning just a piece of media into actually owning a part of a network, governing a protocol, being a co-owner in a much larger collective effort. And I think that's the much more powerful eventual form that we'll get to that users will first be trained on via these Web 2 platforms. And that brings me to the ownership economy report, which we recently published on the Variant site, basically taking stock of where are we in Web 3 today. And for those of you guys who aren't familiar with Variant, our entire thesis as a firm is what we call the ownership economy, where we believe that digital ownership is going to become a really powerful new mechanism that extends throughout all new forms of software, from financial marketplaces to media to gaming to social networks. But the most powerful networks of the next generation, the best software that will be built, are going to be the ones that turn their users into owners. And that ownership has a very broad spectrum of different experiences, ranging from individual ownership to collective ownership of a platform, from the passive to the active. But I think eventually where I would like us to get to, and I think where a lot of us agree that we should get to, is users becoming co-owners of the networks that they're contributing value to. And that's something that the Web 2 platforms can never offer, and so I continue to be really bullish on Web 3 networks that make ownership truly a keystone of their user experiences.
I love that. Well, guys, I think that's a fantastic place for us to end off on. I would like you to just go around really quickly and maybe let people know where they could stay up with your work. We'll start with Morgan here first.
I'm Morgan Beller. I'm at Beller on Twitter, and I'm Morgan at nfx.com, which I might regret saying, but it's pretty obvious, I guess.
That was ballsy.
Anyhow, you can figure it out. Have a great day.
Annie Favre, ANNIEFAUV, on Twitter. You'll find my invisible friend walking around there.
Nice.
And I'm LJin18 on Twitter, lee.substack.com, and you can find Variant at variant.fund.
See, there you go.
Nice. And I'm Cooper at Cooper Chupa. Thank you guys for coming out and listening to us talk about the creator economy. I look forward to it, and thanks to the Permissionless for having us out here.
Thank you. Good job.